Hey, it's the Road Show. I'm Ryan in Denver. Got Alan here in the UK. Alan, I bet you
Oh,
didn't just get back from a 12-hour road trip last night.
I did not. I can't even think what I did on the weekend. It's so busy. There's obviously the Austrian Grand Prix. That was
Yeah.
super exciting. How was the road trip?
As far as road trips go, it wasn't bad, Alan. 12 hours in the US, that's only about a third of the country. Do you like from one end of the UK to the furthest other end? Is that even 12 hours, would you think, or
It probably is about 12 hours, maybe a
12
little bit more.
hours? Okay.
Yeah, but it's very different intensity of driving. So you do
Yeah.
4 hours here, you probably want to stop and just
Yeah.
have a coffee and sort of de-stress.
Right.
But in the US, you get a long straight road, you can just hit that for 8 hours plus. So
You can, and I think most of us, especially those of us who grew up in the Midwest or the West, I mean, we just grew up doing these trips, going back to see grandma at Christmas or whatever. And so 12 hours really isn't that big of a deal. That's about my limit in a day. I've done 16, 18 hours, and that gets a little dangerous. You start to get a little loopy at the end. But 12 hours is, at least at my current age, I can manage 12 hours with the family. My daughter grew up making these trips, so it's not too bad. But I was wondering if this is kind of a uniquely American thing, because you grew up in Australia. I mean, you're
yeah,
not
and
you're not
we
making these trips across the outback.
no, but I did used to do the journey from Melbourne to Sydney. It was about 10 hours.
About
So I
10
used to
hours,
like,
yeah.
yeah, finish work on a Thursday night, drive through the night, get up there for the, sorry, to Adelaide for Adelaide Grand Prix. The same for Sydney for, different motorcycle races that I went to. So yeah, as I said earlier on, it's a lot easier to do the drive in Australia or sort of wide open countries like Australia
Yeah.
or the US. Australia, there is they don't like speed. In and
Yeah.
out of every town, you got to slow down. There's going to be a radar gun there or something that's catching you. But in England, you don't do it so much. Like when I first came from Australia to England, I went from London to Harrogate up north just for dinner that night, and then
Hmm.
drove back. And I met some people, and they went, "Oh, where do you live?" And so well, I live in London, and they went, "Okay, how long are you up for?" And I went, "Oh, just dinner. I'm driving back tonight." And they're like, "Oh, we live like 5 mile down the road, and we weren't sure if we could be bothered coming." So it's a different mindset in England to the US and
Yeah.
Australia.
Yeah, we like to do that out here in Colorado. We'll go up to Aspen and have lunch, right? Shout out to John Dicey and that crew, who every year sets up a lunch at when you want barbecue, when you want good barbecue, Aspen comes to mind, right? But we
Oh
enjoy these
yeah.
trips, and we'll drive 3-4 hours just to get lunch and come back. I mean, this is America, where people will take their Cessna out for a burger somewhere and fly back, But I gotta say, I think the most boring stretch of 12 hours of U.S. interstate is from Denver to Minneapolis.
Oh
There's
really?
absolutely nothing. And to your point about like speed controls and all that, when we left, I think it was Thursday last week, there wasn't one cop the whole way. Coming back, it
Wow.
was a different story. But
Is there
I set
generally
the
police? Like, I find in the US, speeding is pretty relaxed. It's
yeah,
commonplace.
you can do 10 or 15 over pretty comfortably, I think, on the interstate in
Or
most
if you don't, you
places.
get you get swallowed up in
Well,
LA. So,
exactly, exactly. And behind the wheel of a fine automobile like the one we were in, a rental Ford Edge, the
oh
miles
yeah,
just fly. Do you know what the Edge is?
yeah. I do. I rented one to do a road trip to Vegas once when I was there.
Yeah,
So it's got lane assist, it's got active.
which I shut off immediately. But
Oh, do you? Oh, yeah. Lane assist is okay, but active cruise control, like
that's
you can
great.
settle in and
Yeah,
you can play with
that's
all the settings and see how
yeah.
sensitive everything is, and just be an annoying dad to other people in the car.
That's exactly what I did. It's got these four settings for distance. I set it at like the furthest one. I set the cruise at 89, and I just tucked in, behind the car in front of me, and that was it. Not a very compelling car, driving dynamics and that kind of thing. I had to laugh. We'll talk more about this in our next episode, but our podcast mate, Dan Pilling, was here for Pikes Peak, and this was exactly
Oh
the same
yeah.
vehicles we had for that trip down to the color. Not the same car, because we had the misfortune of getting Massachusetts plates on this last car. But not a bad road trip car, to your point, satellite radio, you know, um,
Yep.
decent gas mileage. But I always had an issue with the Edge because there was a vehicle called the Flex. I don't think they make it any longer. And the Flex, it was this box of a thing.
Oh
right? It was this
yeah,
very,
that's
and I
right.
was thought, why not
Bit of a
call that
retro
the
looking thing,
Edge?
wasn't it?
Yeah, it was like a big station wagon, right? And
Yeah,
or an International Harvester Scout, almost profile. But
yeah,
should
that's
have
right.
called that the Edge. Should have called this one with the rounded edges the Flex. But I digress. It's interesting, Alan, because I think so many cars in the States, this concept of a road trip has always historically factored into the car
Yeah.
design itself in a way that again, getting back to other countries and how you drive just isn't a thing or isn't as big of a thing. The-
So I went to West London Porsche on Saturday. I've got a friend that's looking, so I dragged him there. It was hell going to the showroom and sitting there and looking
right?
at all the cars and bits and pieces. And one of the sales guys there, he did a road trip and he went out to Stuttgart to
Mm,
the Porsche Museum. Said it was amazing. Did a road trip on his way out there. Kept on driving. I think he did Lake Como, south of France for a week, and a few other cool sort of passes and road trips on the way
yeah,
back. So he's sending in the information over. It sounded like the European road trip of heaven.
it
So
sure does. What was he in?
yeah, uh, a 986 Boxster.
See, there you go. See, and I
Yep.
think that's an important distinction when we talk about European road cars. There's a vehicle for that. It's the GT, right?
Yeah.
It's the car that I think probably was a product of the 60s and the times of the 60s. So it'd be you and your hot girlfriend going down to, the Riviera, right? For the
Yeah,
weekend
you're
or
out to
something.
impress. Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe it was a 2+2, right?
Yep.
But, you're not bringing the whole family is what I'm getting at, right? And
Yeah.
what did we get in America? We got station wagons and minivans.
Minivans.
And to drive across the expanse of Nebraska. God, I thought we were going to get hit by a tornado yesterday coming back. Just something else you don't have to worry about in the south of France, right? But
No.
anyway, it's interesting. It's again, we just all grew up. I think most of us grew up making these trips. It's just not a big deal.
If you've been doing it for, all of your life,
Yeah.
how has the landscape changed in the US? Is
Yeah,
it
that's a good question. I think some of the adventure is gone, right?
okay?
Now, granted, we took the interstate the whole way, right? I mean, we
I
could
was
have
going to
gotten off
say,
the interstate and seen a little more of America, but that's not always practical,
you
right?
need to get there, don't you?
There is, and there's just been so obvious, obviously there's been so much homogenization, right, of the
Yeah.
American landscape. I still will enjoy the trip from like here to say LA in a car.
Yeah.
I took the family last year. We rented a bright red Jeep Wrangler, top down part of the way. We drove through the desert. We drove through Vegas, all the roadside Americana stuff that's still
Yeah.
around. The Route 66 type stuff is still pretty
Yes.
cool. There's still some of that out there. But between here and Minneapolis, it's just a lot of like Fairfield Inns and I don't know, Panera Breads, and it's not
Dodgy
the
fuel
romance is
stations.
gone.
Yeah. So I plan on
But
also just like I want to do this road trip to Stuttgart next year. So I'll plan that over the next 12 months. But between now and then, I'm going to do a lot of more local road trips. So head out to Wales. There's some amazing roads
oh
in
yeah,
Wales, Scotland. There's some great valleys to drive through. Obviously, something out of like the James Bond Skyfall movie. It's pretty impressive.
well, that's a good segue, Alan,
Go.
to our last guest who we had on,
Oh,
Freddie.
yeah.
What a guy!
What a nice guy, in his own right, obviously trying to cut his own path, partly in the shadow of his dad. But a
Yeah,
lot of people are shy about using their family connections to progress themselves. And he doesn't lead with it, but he's definitely understands what he has. And even though he didn't have many years with his dad, he's grown up in that kind of uh, complex environment. He is such a nice guy, and
yeah,
it's spooky. It feels like what you see of James Hunt on TV.
yeah,
It feels like you're talking to James
yeah,
Hunt. It's
yeah,
crazy, but yeah,
yeah. I got that
fantastic guy.
as well. Um, you know, just growing up as just a regular kid with a regular dad and the shadow
Yeah,
that looms large, right? I cannot imagine because that just predicates every conversation you'll ever have for the rest of your
yeah,
life,
yeah,
right? And he, his dad was a colorful guy, right?
Yeah.
I mean, he was an F1 champ, right? But
Yeah.
there was everything else, and to his point, he talked about how so often it's the racing, it's the competitor that gets lost, in the conversation. And so,
Yeah, and I think one of the, I can't remember whether we actually caught this in the recording or not, but his dad had a reputation for being a playboy. That's one thing. That's what it is. All drivers had that element to them, but he was also, I think, an ex-Olympic athlete prior to that, and a professional athlete, and so he knew about training, he knew about sleep, he knew about preparation. So, we focus too much on the fun bits, and he was a genuine guy. But if you take his dad out of the picture, Freddie's got an incredible story of his own. Playing polo, obviously trying to cut it as a racing driver himself. He's not cut himself off, but he's moved to an island off Scotland, and he's trying to build a great sustainable lifestyle. And then he's also got his business activities. So he's not hanging around. He's definitely going to be more successful in his own right.
Yeah, absolutely. His fashion line and everything else. He's kind of living the dream. I'll be honest. Some of the rest of us are plugging away, punching the clock in a corporate environment day in and day out.
There's nothing stopping him.
He's just doing it. And I think there's a lot to learn from him and his approach to life. And again, to your point, how he has forged his own path and his own reputation. And, just the fact, and this is something that, I think about when, or I've thought about over the years as I've spoken with other known drivers of, different types, different folks, how very few people get to that level, right?
Yeah.
How very few people have that recipe of what it takes, to your point, the fitness, the mental stamina, the dealing with this was something that'll stick with me forever, this concept of mind monkeys. I like being able to put a label on that, and just being able to do something with that, right? It's just, it's not easy,
On the mind monkey side, a lot of people feel like it's just them. But when you hear stories like he had it, his dad had it, Mika Hakkinen had it, that makes you feel comfortable that it's a normal thing to go through, the pressures. So it's
absolutely. But just what a stud, what a great guy. That was fun, and can't wait to get that episode posted.
And he mentioned he's got he's working on a documentary, and
yes,
I'm not jumping the gun by saying this, but our next episode we have Andrew Marriott coming on, and Andrew and I go back a long way. We've done some stuff together. He did a documentary on a race team that I started, my first team, and well, if you want some comedy, we can pull a clip of that one day. And it's taken a few years to be able to be prepared to watch it again. But talking with Andrew, I didn't know, but he's actually helping Freddie on that documentary. He's finding,
oh, no kidding,
different cars. He's helping with different contacts. Yeah, so he's involved in that as well. So it is a small world indeed.
Are you going to send me the link to this documentary of yours?
When we're in a closed room and no one else around, I'll put the CD in
fantastic.
In a laptop that has a CD drive. And
I'm sure it's amazing. You're too modest. Every time we talk, you're too modest.
We'll pour a couple of drinks and we'll sit and watch it and have a giggle.
Yeah, sounds good. I look forward to talking with him very much. I have some homework to do, and it's we got some big names coming down the pike. The road show, so pretty exciting.
It's really warming up. It's getting good. So we and obviously you and I are. Well, you're not new to this. You've done this for 4.5 years. I'm cutting my teeth in this space, so people don't want to listen to me. They want to hear more interesting people. So it'd be good to get some of the guests on that we have planned.
You have picked this up so much more quickly than I did, and I still have a long way to go. But this is a car podcast. Some new cars have been announced over the last week or two, and as I was behind the wheel, the fine steed that was the Ford Escape. Sorry, not Escape. Ford Edge, right? They got the E thing going on. Yeah. I was reminded of just how good something like a Porsche GT4 is. And there are Porsche GT4s. By the way, shout out to, I have a friend on Instagram. He goes by Trixano. Give him a follow on Instagram. He is in Europe right now picking up his GT4 RS. He just sent me a picture of what's the famous hotel in the Alps where everyone puts their the car out in front. It's the
is that on the
turn.
Stelvio pass
I
or
think it must be
or is it
that
another pass near there?
one of those
Yeah.
amazing, beautiful, passes. But
It's on
good
my
on.
checklist to get that backdrop as well.
Right, that's
Yeah.
kind of what I'm. Oh, and I'm jumping way around. I haven't shared with you. Did I tell you what my wife surprised me with, Ellen?
No.
She said, "Look, so next year's my 50th birthday, which I
Okay.
had to
Welcome
actually
to the
stop."
club. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I got a year and 3 months, but I had to think about, is that true? Is it actually 50? It sneaks up on you. And
Yeah.
she said, "I'd like to take you to Europe. Let's go to the Nürburgring. Let's do that trip you've been talking about now for how long?" And so she did something very unlike her, and she reached out to my buddy Colin here in town, who has made this trip several years now, and so they are working together to plan this amazing car guy trip for my 50th birthday, which will be
No way.
fantastic. And
She's a keeper. Don't let her
I
go.
guess so. Yeah, I guess I
Yeah.
can't. I can't wait. I'm.
So,
It's
so
just
this is going to be next year, or
next year. Yeah, probably next fall. So
I'm really sorry. I'm going to invite myself along. We're gonna do shotgun here for sure.
I think I'm probably still paying for it, or at least part of it in some way. So
That's the unwritten rule,
but
isn't it?
well,
Yeah.
I would love to have you join us. I feel like a couple other people are probably going to end up meeting us along the way, and I
Yeah.
haven't been to Europe in a few years now, and the trip is overdue, and I just can't wait. And the older I get, we've talked about this before. Your trip to Monaco. The older I get, the older we all get, the more we have to make time for these experiences, right? And
Yeah.
it's talking about cars is great, right?
Well,
Cars and coffees are
obviously,
great, but
I'm coming out for Monterey Car Week this
yeah.
year. So yeah, we'll do an alternating thing each year. We'll try and get that adventure planned. So
Yeah, absolutely. No, we've got to have something to talk about, right? This is
something to
this is a write-off now, right? So
something to get you through the 40 hours a week, or something that we
right,
have to
right.
devote to somebody else. So
But I kicked this bit of the conversation off by talking about some new cars. One of those is the Bugatti Tourbillon, if I'm pronouncing that correctly.
Tourbillon, yeah.
Yeah. And of course, that is a term for a wristwatch that has, I don't know what, it's this crazy complication, right? It's kind of looks like a gyroscope type thing. I think by design, it cancels out a lot of the forces of nature and ends up being a very highly accurate, but very expensive watch
Yeah.
on your wrist. And so this car definitely, the name suits it because it is quite a thing. So what do we know about this thing?
It's honestly a work of art, and I guess
Yeah.
that's kind of where Bugatti sit. It has that cool styling, and obviously that there's the watch that goes with it that has the V16 pistons reciprocating in it, and I think there's 16. I haven't even looked on the watch, which goes for still more than I can afford. Is it 1.5, 2 million? I think. For the watch,
I think it's 4.6 million is
Oh,
this
there
new
you go.
car. So.
Oh, the car itself. Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. The
absolutely.
watch is just $1 million. Oh, geez. Okay. All right. So yeah, this is
Just a million.
this will be strictly theoretical for the time being.
Yeah.
But it's 1,775 combined horsepower. It's a hybrid.
Yeah. Yep.
You know,
The great thing is the hybrid version is the same weight as the previous model, the non-hybrid. So that is pretty impressive. And when you see the photos of the vehicle without the bodywork on, the naked chassis,
Yeah.
it's a work of art in every way. So yeah.
And you can say that you are a chassis engineer who's worked with Mercedes and McLaren and others, Ascari.
Yep.
So what is it? What's going on in that design when you look at it? What are you seeing through your eyes?
I'm seeing a really efficient structure. The materials that are using, the way everything interacts with everything else. It's just really efficient in where the material is and what it is and how it's used. So trying to keep all the weight between the front and center, front and rear axles, so
Sure.
you don't get that pendulum effect. Everything is beautifully done. It's almost like where art meets engineering. So.
I will say, if anything is worth $4.6 million, it's probably this. And Bugattis have a.
You've seen the instrument panel.
I
It
have.
is better than a watch. It's
Yeah.
right there in front of you in your car. It's the two coming together. So
It is one of the few, I don't know, maybe in a class of one of cars that, cost literally is no object, that anything
yeah,
goes, that anything is going to be done as absolutely well as it can be done. But everything I think still has a purpose, which some arcs miss.
yep,
And I guess if you look at this as an investment, I think Bugattis, I mean, starting with the Veyron, and you remember what a thing that was, 1,001
yeah,
horsepower, wheels and tires you had to send back to Michelin in France, it'd be, at something like $40,000 a corner or something, but even those, I mean, I've kept their value incredibly well. I mean,
yeah.
if you are a car guy with money and you want the car of the moment and you want a car that's, going to be kind of money in the bank. I mean, could do a
Well,
lot worse than this.
it's well engineered. It's
Yeah.
reliable. Yes, it's expensive to own, but it's expensive to buy. So it's kind of cost of ownership. Per million of purchase, it kind of the ratio is probably right. It looks beautiful. It's still exclusive, so it's still a small club, relatively. So it ticks all the boxes.
It does. And I do think that it has normal wheels and tires again. I think with the Veyron, it was some sort of weird metric size and the way they were, more than I do, but the way the tire, sat on the wheel, it was riveted or something. There was something different going on. And
Yeah,
I think with,
clamped. It was
yeah,
it was a heavy car, so
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah had to do some extreme things in there.
I'm kind of
Yeah, but
fascinated
then
with tires. Oh, go ahead.
no, go on. Let's
No, I was
delve
just going
into
to
the world of
say,
tires.
tires have always just really interested me, and I think one of the reasons why is in that in the time that I've been driving, I think tires have had more advancement than perhaps any other, or arguably as much development, right, in that period of time, in 30 years or whatever. How long have I been driving?
Yeah,
Yeah, about 30 years. Than almost anything else. And what a
yeah.
difference tires make. And I am
Well, there's
always,
different price points have and different brands have different
yeah,
qualities or attributes. Some will wear faster, some are lighter, some hold more grip, some are better in different conditions. And it's I won't name names on this unless someone wants to
yeah,
sponsor the podcast, but and I don't want to get in trouble at McLaren either. So
right.
yeah,
But pick your poison. I mean, there is a tire for you at pretty much any price point. I just got a
yeah,
quote, the tires on this GT4 behind me. I get about 4,000 or 5,000 miles out of a set. So I just hit 10,000 miles. Oh, by the way, our friend Dan McInnes, he of the
yeah,
infinite number of, whatever, what does he have? 80,000 miles on his Spider. He just got a
yeah.
really nice shout out on the latest episode of the Smoking Tire, where they talk a little bit about him and winning his GT4 and the miles on his Spider. But,
Oh, cool. I
he
have
goes
to
through
say,
tires left and right. So,
I on the Targa, and I don't know whether it's like what it's like in Denver, but in most of London, the roads are pretty bad.
yeah,
There's some pretty big potholes, and I've never been so careful about dodging, some like sharp edge potholes because I don't want to damage a wheel and I don't want to have to
yeah,
buy another tire unnecessarily. So
yeah.
yeah,
It's a
trying to be extra careful there.
Well, yeah, right. Because if the tires have anywhere at all, you can't just replace one, as you know,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Especially on an all-wheel drive car like yours. The quote
Yeah,
on
and obviously OCD as well. You'd end up just wanting to have a nice clean set, wouldn't you? So
well, yeah, there's that, right? In the quote just on the GT4, which I don't think the tires are as big as on your 992, $2,400 just for the four tires and installation. And then you have to
yeah,
worry about, are the wheels going to get nicked up while they're putting the new
yeah,
tires on?
yeah,
I am so OCD. I have bought new, so not a Porsche. It's a different setup than most cars, the way the wheels are on. It's not lug nuts. I forget what the setup is exactly, but I will buy those new pieces just so
yeah.
they look good on the car,
Oh, nice. I was
Because
thinking about buying a second set of wheels actually,
yeah,
and just so I can use and abuse them, and then I've got the
yeah.
original set to bolt back on. Plus, I feel like I want to have a red set of wheels, something sporty on there
Yeah,
occasionally as
nice,
well.
nice, nice. Yeah, I think in your car I might go for that sort of the Fuchs reissue that they have.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
I just with the polished rims, but anyway, yeah,
It's
tires are no
nice.
joke. Tires have come a long way, but we have paid and are continuing to pay for it, and it's just it's a thing. You gotta take a day off or a morning off because you don't want to leave the car behind. You want to be there. You want to make sure they're doing a good
Well,
job and all
and
that.
also that doesn't include the 2 or 3 days of homework that you're doing before you go as well. So,
There's that,
you
and
know,
the
yeah,
alignment. With a car like a fine, car like our, one of our Porsches. I mean, I think it's pretty much suggested that you get an alignment every time you get new
yeah.
tires, or at least every other time, right?
Not to dwell on this too long, but do you have
Yeah,
like a particular place you go? It's like you won't go anywhere else because
yeah,
that's the guy that's going to
yeah,
treat your car, you know, with
yeah.
respect.
I feel like I give a lot of shout outs to our friends at Porsche Colorado Springs, but I drive down 2 hours to Porsche Colorado Springs. We do a walk around. I know the service guys down there. We agree that the wheels are free of marks for the most part and that kind of thing. And
Nice.
they've never let me down. I feel like pretty much every other place I've ever gone, I come back and a wheel will have a mark or, I don't think it's that difficult. I think it's an issue of just being detail oriented and just taking
Yeah.
pride in your work, right? And
And so
more
when
often
when
than
you're
not,
there, you drink
yeah.
their coffee, do a First Dibs podcast or something, do you as
Oh,
well while you're there?
yeah, absolutely. Hey, and speaking of that, I just sat down with our friend Maurice Merrick from Horsepower Heritage. He does one of the best
Ah,
car podcasts out there, and we talked a little bit about Pikes Peak and all that. We get along so well that he hits record, and then before I know it, I think 10 minutes have passed, and it's been an hour, and the show's coming to an end. But look for that soon as well. I'm also
do you
looking
know?
forward to listening to myself on that because
Yeah,
I'm not quite sure what I said, but
you're out there. You're a busy guy. I don't know how you have time for it. I'm struggling just for what you and I do. But thanks
yeah,
for connecting Maurice and myself. So he has some space in a house that he's renting at Monterey Car Week. So I'm heading up there and staying with him and really looking forward to just sitting down and having a drink and chatting with him. He's got so many stories. He's such a charming
he's
guy.
he's a real gentleman, and I like this idea that he's calling it the Horsepower Heritage House. It's almost like fraternities and
It's,
sororities. There's like a Greek system here,
I
so
feel like I
that's
need to bring an
apparently the move.
offering or something into the house.
Right. I think a bottle of bourbon probably would go pretty far.
There you
Scotch. I
go.
think he's a Scotch
That's the
man, but
poison.
and
Okay.
speaking of drinking, coming back to Porsche Colorado Springs, I think what you were getting at is, you get what you pay for, but you better believe I eat everything, I drink everything, I suck up as much of that free Wi-Fi as I can. Right? Well, I'm
Got any
there.
sweets? Got any pens? Yeah.
Right, exactly. And I usually get out of there
Totally.
with a T-shirt or something. Those guys are the best, truly. Again, the older you get, you learn a few things, and when you find a good mechanic, when you find a good shop, when you find a good salesperson or Porsche, store, you stick with them, right? I mean, if I
Yeah.
move from Denver someday, I will still buy my cars from Porsche Colorado Springs. It's just, it's
There you
just
go. And they don't
how
even
it goes.
sponsor us. So
They
we're
not
getting
yet.
some, yeah,
Well,
fingers
shout out to
crossed.
First Dibs. They have their own podcast and they do a great job, of course. But
And we're
hopefully get
hoping to
those
get
guys
those
on
guys
soon.
on the show as well soon. So
Yeah,
yeah, we'll
absolutely.
we'll keep talking.
That'll be a fun one because, these guys are always willing to give you a peek behind the curtain, right? Like the
Ah,
workings of what is it like to be, a sales guy or a manager at one of the top Porsche stores in the world, truly, it's always a fascinating conversation and they're just fun guys anyway. So
so
anyway,
I have a friend. He wants to buy I think an earlier gen box to one of the middle ones. Is it?
it's like 986, 987,
What's the
981.
one after that? 981.
Yeah, that's
And or I just didn't want to say 918. It's a very different car.
I made that mistake.
And
Yeah.
yeah, and so he's been looking for someone. Can you imagine being a Porsche sales guy? You must have the same guy call you every week, saying, "Yeah, and this could go on for a couple of years."
Yeah, yeah,
The patience of a saint. It's like,
yeah,
dude, are you in or are you out?
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
time to
I think
go.
it's the
Where's your
long
wife? Get your wife on the
right.
line. Let's talk to her.
I think it's the
Is he
long
really?
game,
Yeah, that's
for a
it.
lot
But
of
then
those guys.
once
But
they've got you, haven't they? So
and that's it.
we're not doing
And
it.
how do you not? How do you like who drives a Porsche or has a series of Porsches and then goes to another brand? That just doesn't happen. Like
Yeah,
people jump around BMW, other stuff, but once Porsche has you in their cult, You know,
Yeah.
it's really hard to get out, but you don't want to leave. You know, they're just such
Yeah,
good.
it would have to be a bad experience to make you look elsewhere or something pretty
Yeah,
phenomenal. So,
absolutely. Yeah, and not every
or
Porsche.
maybe I like as you say it, or a slightly higher credit score. I don't know.
Right. There's that.
But then you
There's
go to
that.
the next model Porsche up, don't you?
That's
Just get to
right.
the
Right.
GT3 RS or
The
something.
struggle
So
is real. The struggle is real. But
you touched on Ferrari as well. Obviously, they've
yeah,
got some a new car out, the 12 cylinder, so 12 cylinder to
yeah, they
English
like to
speaking
get creative
people.
down there, don't they?
Yeah, that's right.
The
Um,
12 cylinder. Yeah.
yeah, La Ferrari, Ferrari.
Yeah.
I like that. But they do what they do very well, don't they?
Mhm.
So it's they obviously took the 812 Superfast, which is I heard someone say not long ago it's seriously unhinged fast,
Yeah.
and so now they've just upped the game again, with a new car, and it takes it's not a massive step because it's a pretty high bar already, and they're taking inspiration from the 50s and 60s, so it's great that those old designs and styles aren't dead. Class is coming back. That's what I
Yes.
like to think.
Yes.
So
Yes. And I've always liked the 12-cylinder Ferraris, right? I mean, just visually, I think those have always been the most compelling to me personally.
yeah,
Although I do have a pal here, shout out Sven here in Denver, who I think in a matter of days is going to be taking delivery of a new 296 GTO. So
oh wow,
I wouldn't throw that one out of bed either. So pretty good looking car, pretty good looking thing.
it's a
So
great car. Yeah,
yeah, yeah. So we've talked great cars, Alan, but a few years ago, there's a lot of talk about what we're calling COVID cars. And
oh yeah,
cars that, I know we had a couple really good conversations with our friends down at Porsche Colorado Springs. You are my direct line to McLaren. They're sort of my direct line to Porsche, all things Porsche. And, during COVID and a car, and you can talk more about this, Alan, but cars anymore are global products, right? In the
yeah.
truest sense. I mean, an American car might be 55% American, right? A German car has parts from Ukraine and other places.
Well, that's exactly it. It's not just cars are global. Supply chain is
Yeah,
streamlined as well. The cars are getting more complicated, more expensive to make, and so the supply chain has to try and fall in line. And like you say, the Ukraine, a lot of wiring harnesses came out of there. Obviously, there was a massive shortage of different chips, so different suppliers were sourced. There was a whole load of fake chips that found their way into the market as well.
how does that happen? Like, I guess everything is faked anymore, and you've heard about it in the aerospace industry. You're at
Well,
Boeing, you
you
might
don't
be
know
in as you listen
you
to
don't know
this.
until it's too late.
Yeah,
Something's
yeah,
not built with the right quality, and it takes maybe a slightly different environment, or configuration of current draw, and then you have an issue. So, but the thing about COVID cars is, there was such a shortage of cars
yeah,
that people kind of had to take whatever they could
yeah,
get. So
yeah.
you're buying a car with a certain spec, but then when it turns up, it might not have all the bits. Like I think you
Right.
mentioned, Bose sound system, there
Yep.
was a shortage, and various other switches, and again, semiconductors. So different options just didn't happen. And obviously
Yeah.
my daughter's partner worked at Porsche, and there's people that had their cars on order for 2 years. They turn up and he's like, listen, I'm really sorry, but it's got doesn't have this or that option.
Right.
Do you want it? We'll throw in maybe a free service and try and sweeten it up. But then people had to decide, I've waited 2 years, do I get it or do I say no? So, but the thing is, so that was then. Now cars are getting to the point where maybe lease deals end, people want to trade in for something new or different. And so now when you're going to buy a secondhand car, you've got to understand, was this a COVID car?
Yeah.
Are there things missing? What's missing? You're really going to have to do your homework a whole lot better than definitely I've done in the past. So
Yeah, it's always something, right? Like at least here in the U.S., like watch out for the flood cars after a hurricane or something. I feel like you have to
yeah,
be so on top of things. But I'm trying to rewind a little bit and remember how that was handled. And at the time, did you get an IOU? Was the price adjusted? Because I don't think it was.
No.
But at the same time, you've ordered a Porsche, you're 2, 3 years out, and here's your thing. It's like, I'm married to a supermodel. She's just missing a couple toes. I mean, it's still a good thing, right? Like it's
I
just,
can live without the toes. If it was
I
teeth,
can live
it'd
with
be
it,
a
right?
different
Put a
story,
shoe on,
but
right?
yeah.
I mean, and I think that's kind of the approach a lot of people took. Like it wasn't enough to say, hey, all right, deal's done.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess I never really heard the follow up. Like if you were missing a Bose amplifier in your Porsche, did that get installed later? Obviously I don't think it was generally safety stuff. I feel like a lot of it was entertainment stuff, sat nav, if that's a term people still use. I feel like a lot of it was
Yeah.
like seat motors. So you may have ordered power seats and gotten manual seats. Okay, well, I'd argue that's a better Porsche, but I
Yeah.
don't know how that was handled.
Yeah, and I guess we're sort of like you say, there weren't that many cars around, so people were
Yeah.
taking what they could get. They were over sticker price. So, dude, do you want it or not? Someone
Yeah.
else is going to be, queuing to get this. So most people took it. So there's the financial hit that people took. Some models are holding strong, others have taken a hit
Yeah.
across the board. And yeah, how important is that feature to you? So you're just
Yeah.
going to have to do your homework now.
Yeah.
It's about this window now when
Yep.
those cars are probably going to start coming back on the market again.
Yeah, I think you're going to see a couple model years where there weren't a lot of
Yeah.
like carbon brakes on Porsches. I feel like that was a big one. That was a big one. And look back at like how, Porsche, just because that's something I know about a bit, and how historically you look back at the 997 model Porsches, and how the point ones, they're I think like 9 or 10 for every point two ever made, just because that's the way,
wow.
the global economy turned, right? It was booming and then it wasn't, and a lot of people canceled orders and things. And
Well,
it's
my son has a love affair, what he calls the COVID car, the Ferrari F8. So
okay.
it was supposed to be the bigger volume car, but actually the way it turned out through COVID, there's actually fewer of them. And so he's like, Dad, I'm going to get one of those. I'm going to invest it, and
I
whatever justification you want, son, go for it. But
I think those look fantastic. I think
yeah,
those are some of my most favorite modern Ferraris. And I guess I didn't realize that was intended to be more of a volume car, but
yeah.
yeah.
So the way it panned out, it was fewer builds. So actually it's more exclusive. So
Well,
yeah.
buy them when you can. For years, Alan, I wanted a Ferrari 550 or 575. I wanted a manual Ferrari 550, and they were $60,000 to $80,000 cars. You could get the best one in the country for $90,000 for a while here in the States, maybe $100,000, and then now, the last time I looked, they were close to twice that. Right? They might even be more now because, again, gated, V12, all these things,
Yeah.
and they looked fantastic. And now I can't afford one. So, but
Yeah, I have a, I have, I have a
F8s.
yearning. I have a yearning for a 599.
Yeah,
Doesn't have to be the GTO. That'd be great.
yeah,
But yeah, I still think it's great value. So maybe,
yeah.
yeah, bonus time. I'll see if we can add one to the Orchard Museum.
Well, right. I mean, even the Mondials aren't cheap anymore. By the way, I always think, someday I'll own a Ferrari, and
Yeah, and Lewis is going there, and then the rumor is, Adrian will go there on $105 million over 3 years.
I mean that money
So,
comes from somewhere, right?
yep,
Yeah,
exactly. But share price will go up. He'll pay for himself in no time at all. So
absolutely. But lesson here is to be careful if you're shopping for a car. To bring this back to the
yeah,
COVID cars, if you are shopping for, what
yeah.
were the COVID years? The COVID epic. What were those years, Alan? Was that 2018 to 22? I don't
Yeah, I
know.
was gonna say 2022. Yeah,
22. Okay, yeah. Watch out. You never you never know what you might end up with. But I suppose with
yeah,
Porsches and some of these other cars, at the end of the day, it's not gonna matter one whit. But it's supermodel minus a couple toes is still a supermodel, right?
yeah. And so on that public advisory notice,
Yeah.
we'll end there.
Yeah. All right. Alan, always a pleasure talking with you. Cannot wait for our next guest. So by the time you listen to this, that'll be in the can and ready to go. And
It's going to be great for you and I because Andrew is one of those guys. He has just so many stories, and we're going to have to ask him to keep it family, PG-13.
do we
Maybe do
have
an
to ask
after
him
hours.
that? Okay.
He knows a lot of stuff. Like a lot of F1 drivers of old used to sleep on his floor,
Oh,
so
no
he's got
kidding.
lots of stories. Yeah,
Oh, this is
he
going to be
knows
amazing.
everyone.
Will this
Yeah,
be our
friends with
first?
Jackie Stewart.
Oh, really? Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Well, I've got some homework to do to get the most out of this one. And maybe we'll have an excuse to do our very first Roadshow After Hours episode, to your point.
There
So
you go. So we're going to be able
can't wait.
to get him going, and we can just sit back and yeah, he can just basically own the pot. We'll be the guests on his show, I think. So
Fantastic. I mean, that is the easiest way. I only wish that we were all, going to be in the same room together, right?
Yeah.
That's as wonderful as this is. There's something about sitting down with someone like that. I think back to Bruce Meyer or someone like that. It's just to be in the room with someone telling stories like that. Yeah. So, all right,
Well,
Alan,
we'll make
thanks
it
so
happen.
much. Yeah. Hey, until then, we're the Roadshow. Thank you.
Goodbye.